All right, guys, I think it's been, 4 minutes, so hopefully everybody who is meant to be here is here. So allow me to epically share my screen.
No? Tam, kde stavíme ty domečky, no. No.
All right, hopefully you can see my screen by now, and welcome to my workshop, my presentation about the six super steps to desuckify and succeed with your pitch. I'll be a bit like DJ Khaled to show you the keys to success, and clearly you can see I'm a pretty big fan of alliterations because it's six super, and super is actually a shortened version of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious steps to desuckify and succeed with your pitch. So that way you can win this entire competition with an absolute stellar pitch. So let's get to step number one. Wait, what's sorry about that. What is this? What's going on? And that exactly is step number one. You need to start with a big bang beginning, again with the alliterations. Do something people don't expect. And that is the only way you'll actually get someone's attention. And that is the single most important tip I can give you today. Hence, I'm starting with it. And this is something that I've done with all of my presentations, with all of my clients. You need to start with a very, very strong attention grabbing beginning. But that was the first step. And now I should actually clarify who the heck am I to tell you about presentations and presentation skills, because you're probably as confused as ever. Well, my name is Oliver, and I'm a person who clearly enjoys taking pictures which look like he's on a duck hunt holding a double barrel shotgun. And my top three favorite things in the world, so we can sort of get to know one another on a more deeper level, are that I really like the music of Travis Scott. My favorite food are kebabs. Sorry, Sarah. I meant that my top three favorite things are startups and good ideas, artificial intelligence and presentation skills. So that those are my top three favorite things. And yeah, I've been doing presentations for quite some time now. When you're really bad at sports, you have to win other awards. So instead of winning sports awards, I just went around and won presentation and speech awards. And why am I giving you this presentation today is I always preface this with a single statistic. Every year, there's 100 flipping million new startups opening. And obviously, that's only those startups that get founded, with many, many more ideas just getting ideated every single year. And listen, some ideas are just really poor ideas and they're just scrappy and deserve to die. Then there are some ideas that just have awful, awful execution, and those ideas also are pretty crappy, or the execution is crappy rather, and also they deserve to die. And sometimes there are ideas that are just founded by a really, really bad and a really awful team, and what those ideas and those startups also deserve to die. But the issue is that bad pitches kill great startups. When you have a great startup with an awesome idea, an awesome team, an awesome execution, yet it dies due to a bad pitch, it's a pretty, pretty bad way to go. And to really move your idea forward, you need to stand out. in a field of many ideas. And even one very wise, very wealthy man said it, that communication is pretty darn important. But the issue I have with many people that will teach you how to pitch and how to give presentations is they will just teach you about very general sort of stuff. They will tell you keep eye contact. So you try and keep eye contact, looking like a Western movie from the Wild West. You keep eye contact because they tell you keep eye contact. They tell you again keep eye contact. So you keep even more eye contact, and suddenly your eyes are this big and you're keeping eye contact. They tell you you need to move your arms around properly, body language, this sort of crap. So you start moving your arms around chaotically, like you're doing the Orange Justice. And they tell you you need to be loud, so you start screaming. And then suddenly they tell you all of this very generic info, and that is my issue. But you're in good company, because if there's one thing you must know about me is I hate nonsense. So you are not getting any of this crap from me. And with that, our intro is over, and let's get to the actual meaty part of my presentation or my workshop on how to pitch. And the first step is to nerd over biology. I know you're really angry at me, screaming at the screen, saying, hey, I didn't come here to learn about biology. I'm not in high school anymore. Get this crap out of here. But I think it's really important we sort of understand the human biology and how we perceive information. And particularly one thing, the brain and parts of the brain. We have three parts of our brain, as you can see. First, we have the neocortex. That's this outer part, which deals with complex thinking. Then there's the middle brain that deals with emotional context. And lastly, the oldest, most ancient part of the brain that we've inherited from basically the smallest of organisms through evolution is the lizard brain. That is common to all, even the tiniest of organisms. And that's the lizard brain, which deals with basic instincts and survival. So that's the oldest part. The neocortex is like the special part that is probably the one that we've developed, basically the latest, or like the nearest to us on the timeline. And the major issue that people make when thinking about presentations and pitching is that basically we create our ideas, our very complex ideas about AI and machine learning and super new materials and high speed whatever and lasers and this and that. We create them in the very complex neocortex part of our brain. And when we send this idea and when we pitch our idea and send it to the other person, to the listener, we almost assume that obviously it only makes sense that they will accept the idea through their neocortex, because complex to complex communication, it needs to work that way. But actually, there are certain biological tendencies that force us to basically gain or grasp the idea through our lizard brain. And we really need to realize that and adjust our pitch and our presentation in accordance with this fact. So when the lizard brain receives the idea, it goes through a very simple process. It has very limited processing capabilities. It cannot store much info over the short term. So it just looks at an idea, at a piece of information, and says, okay, is this survival related? Because after all, I'm the lizard brain, and my first thing is survival. Is it? Okay, if it is survival related, I need to send it higher for sort of more and deeper levels of processing and understanding this piece of information. Well, and if it's not, then it goes and asks itself, hey, like, I really want to focus on survival again, because obviously that is the number one thing, survival. So how can I basically ignore this piece of information as soon as possible? How can I get rid of it so I can focus on survival again? So it asks, can I ignore it? Is it boring? And if you can ignore a piece of information, well, it will most likely ignore it. But if the information is special, if it's presented in a way that engages the lizard brain, even though it's not survival related, it says, okay, this is cool, this is interesting. What I'll do is I'll simplify it. I'll basically take the most important information from this piece of information and send it higher to the middle brain and the neocortex. And there is a very good reason for this, because exactly as I said, survival is the number one thing. So when our ancestors basically encountered a saber-toothed tiger in the wild, well, of course, it makes much more sense to focus on survival and survival instincts and this fight or flight mechanism, rather than just going like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, how many dots does he have? So we always focus on the big idea, the general idea, the grand scheme, rather than individual details. And it's always the big picture before details. So how do we feed the lizard? How do we feed information to the lizard brain in a way that's easy to understand? The info needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, and it needs to be novel. It needs to be interesting. It needs to engage, because boring information just doesn't engage like anyone. So, for example, if we were to present eBay or multiple businesses, which we'll do over the next slides, how can we present it in a way that's concise and simple? For example, when you take eBay and you imagine you had to basically explain eBay as a single tweet, which is a very fruitful exercise, I feel personally, just explaining ideas in a very short format, like you were to tweet them. eBay is an online platform which allows sellers to post items to sell and buyers to bid on them. You understand the idea. It's short, it's concise, it's understandable, and that's that. Bill Gates, if he had to explain Microsoft in a single tweet, he would probably say something along the lines of, Microsoft creates products, mainly software, to increase your productivity, and Xbox, not the most useful tool for productivity. I can say myself as a proud owner of one. But obviously there are certain limits, so you cannot like oversimplify your ideas. So just beware of that. Just don't turn it into something that's completely uninteresting. And even worse, if you're Jeff over here. So it needs to be as short as possible, but as long as necessary. That's what I like to say. And really, you also saw the really simple language that was used. And I almost feel that sometimes when founders write their startup explanations, they try to use this fancy terminology. And I think some of you might be victims of this, because you're with your idea, you're with your startup 24/7. So it's natural for you to use the terms like an MVP, AI, bootstrap, ML, like machine learning, NLP, natural language processing. But really, if you were to read it, like, for example, our good friend Shakespeare, if you were to actually read what you've written from a completely unbiased point of view, you would actually realize that what you're writing doesn't sound like your sort of human language at all. So if there is a simple four-step process I can recommend, is to write it, read it, and actually like read it out loud, because we write completely differently than we write. Then you need to check it. Does it make sense? Is it short? Is it concise? Can you make it within the time of your overall pitch? So that applies for like the whole pitch, not just a single sentence, but the whole pitch. You write the pitch, you read the pitch, you check it if it makes sense and makes the time limit, and then you repeat it. As in, if it doesn't make sense, you go back, you iterate, you rewrite it, you read it again, you check it, and you have to go through this iteration process until it makes sense and you make good timing. And now this is sort of an exercise for you. I'll give you 30 seconds to just write down like this single sentence, this overarching idea behind your idea, in 30 seconds. This is just like a very sample positioning statement if you're completely lost. But I think if you have like a completely different sentence you could use, or it's a different sentence scheme, please go ahead. This is just inspiration for those of you that wouldn't be able to come up with anything. So I'll give you 30 seconds, and the 30 seconds start now. Right, 30 seconds are over, so I hope you were able to write something, or at least are finishing writing something right now. It's a really good exercise to sort of shorten your idea to a single sentence, because that will allow you to do our second step to success: keep it simple, stupid, the classic KISS principle. So yeah, keep it simple, jargon free, eliminate complicated language, explain it really simply, really briefly, concisely, but also interestingly, so nothing overly general. And now, I know you really hoped that we would move away from the biology, but there's one more thing associated with these three parts of the brain. Uh, when the idea enters the lizard brain, it then moves, as I mentioned, it moves higher up the chain, through the middle brain, up to the neocortex. And at every step of this journey, it basically engages us in a different way. Uh, the Greeks, they had special names for that, so I'll match it with their terminology. When it enters through the lizard brain, we call it ethos. So this is that sort of like gut feeling that I really believe the other person, I really believe the idea. It interests me, it engages me. Then we have the pathos. So that's more of the emotional side of the idea. So that instead of going through your gut, it goes through your heart, it engages your heart, and then it moves up to the neocortex, which is logos, and there it engages your brain. So it essentially does a full body tour through your gut, through your heart, over up to your brain at all these different stages. And you need to account for that, and you need to create your pitch with this in mind. You need to make it engaging on a gut feeling level, make it interesting, but also you need to make it a bit more emotional. And obviously, you need to sort of rationalize it with some logical elements, be it data, statistics, cold hard facts. And all of these three need to be present to be fully powerful in your pitch. So, for example, if we were to sell a Tesla, a Roadster, the gut feeling, you would just go and say, hey, we have a really fast car. It accelerates super quickly. And suddenly the listener is interested. They're like, wow, okay, tell me more. Then you can move on and you can explain how driving a Tesla, a Roadster, is super good. Well, or at least better for the environment than if you were to use a petrol car. And by driving a Tesla, you are contributing to the future of our planet. And lastly, you can also position it more from a logical point of view, where you can go and explain that driving electric is cheaper than petrol. And by covering all of these three bases, you've essentially created a much more bulletproof argument, a much more bulletproof case. And because we have our wonderful friends from Deep Note, I decided to also use them as a sort of a case study. So if you were to actually go ahead and try to sell Deep Note and their product, well, you can say that our software is used by NASA, by Stanford, and suddenly you have the listener listening because like, wow, NASA, Stanford, big institutions. Okay, I'm listening. And suddenly you can go and explain how using Deep Note is very simple, it's enjoyable, it is made by data scientists for data scientists, or it simplifies everything, it's really nice, collaborative, yada yada yada. And then you can do sort of the finishing blow with the logical argument that, well, our cheapest license is actually free, so there are no barriers. You're saving money. And again, all three bases covered, a complex argument made. So the step number three to a successful pitch is ethos, pathos, logos. You need to engage all three. So now we're finally moving away from the biology, and let's say we actually take your ideas. This is a very schematic a representation of your idea. Now, say you have your idea and you take this idea and you present it to people, right? It's an idea that deals with education. So imagine you take your idea and imagine you went and you spoke to a teacher. Now, take just 15 seconds and think, how would you explain your idea? How would you try to sell your idea to a teacher? What would you mention? What would you put emphasis on? Um, think about that for 15 seconds. All right. Now, let's do the same thing, but instead of a teacher, imagine you're talking to a student. So, again, you have your idea. How would you explain your idea? How would you try to sell a student on trying out your idea? What would you mention? What would you emphasize? What would you want them to do with your idea? So, again, 15 seconds, just think about that. And lastly, let's do this for the third time because the third time's the charm. And imagine you went and you pitched your idea to an investor or a corporate partner or somebody like that. And you basically get the demographic. But again, think for like 10 to 15 seconds. How would you explain your idea? What would you emphasize? What would be the key points you would try and explain? So again, just 10 to 15 seconds and just think about that. Well, hopefully, now that you've thought about all of these different scenarios, I really hope you've seen that uh, at every for every different person, you sort of shifted the emphasis a little bit because they are essentially interested in something different, right? And a really good example of this, and this will be one of the nicest pieces of homework you will ever receive. So this is my only piece of homework I'll give you is to go and watch YouTube. There's a series called Explained in 5 Levels of Difficulty by the channel Wired. It's one of my favorite series because it exactly shows this idea that how a single concept can be explained in a multitude of ways. And even though the concept remains completely equal, it's the same thing, there are multiple ways to put it, or as the Brits like to say, there are multiple ways to skin a cat. So please go and watch this series. It's a really interesting look at how you can explain something in multiple ways. And essentially, to sell your idea, right? Uh, you need to know, number one, who is it that you are selling your idea to? Who are you pitching? what is his/her goal, because depending on their goal, you obviously need to position your idea in a bit different way. How do they actually make their evaluations? How do they evaluate what's a good idea or what's a bad idea? Because whilst for a VC or a corporate partner, money might be the number one thing. For a student or a teacher, maybe it might be efficiency gains, simplifying their life. So they have different methods of evaluation. And essentially, what is our aim? Because again, for a teacher, we might want them to recommend our product to their students. If we were pitching to a student, our aim would be to sell them on our idea to make them use our product. And for a VC, it would be maybe to invest. So there are different aims, different ways to evaluate your idea, different needs of all of these different people. You would usually need to do a bit of research, maybe go through somebody's LinkedIn, do customer interviews. But luckily, because we have people like Ondra, he was nice enough to actually give you what you need to mention in your pitch in this competition. Well, Psych, he promised that it will be a few things, but it's actually a bunch of things. No, I'm actually joking. And why am I joking? You don't really need to cover every single thing that is on this list, or not to a super deep level, because number one, you simply don't have the time to explain everything at a super duper detailed level. But number two, our brains just don't work like that. We cannot hold that much info in our working memory. There is a really cool thing about our brains, is that we tend to think in threes. After all, there are the three kings or the three wise men. There are even companies like CNN, BBC. You usually see these three-letter abbreviations. The grand thought behind the U.S. Declaration of Independence, and basically the idea of being a U.S. citizen is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Again, three things, right? We should think in threes, and just please, I'm not sure if my sound will play, but we even, yeah, we even have a lot of animals with three letters, but just don't make the mistake of saying some completely irrelevant crap. But yeah, basically, our brains think in threes. We think in triples. So it might be helpful when constructing your pitch to think about if you could say just three things to further convince us as the jury of your grand idea, the one that we've outlined previously in the beginning. What would be those three main things? I mean, there are multiple ways you could go about it. You could, if you were pitching an actual business, which you're not now, you could say that maybe our key partner is, or our big customer is. When you say our big customer is NASA, as I mentioned with Lead Note, that's a pretty convincing thing. We already have X LOIs, letters of interest. Again, that's pretty convincing. We have a patent on our idea. We're the first to do it. We're the first on the market. Convincing. A new law will take effect very soon that will basically propel our idea to be the most successful thing in the world. Convincing. We see a trend of 2,000 per year growth in this industry. We have 20 years of combined experience, 50 years of combined experience in the education space. A new scientific discovery allows us to create this product. Again, all these things can be very good, what I call convincers. And you need to find what are the top 3 to 5 main things that are convincing. And why not more? Why not 8? Because, as I mentioned, you don't have the time to mention everything. And unless you want to join the fastest rapper comparison chart here at the top, uh, basically don't do it. You don't get any points for saying stuff really, really fast. It doesn't help your case if you rush your pitch. So please just focus on the main three ideas, 3 to 5 main ideas behind your startup, and mention those and really double down on those rather than mentioning everything you can. So yeah, the step number 4 is 3 to 5 convincers. And now you have your convincers, you have all these different parts. And when you take a look at this image, right, you take a look at the background, does this look like bread to you? I mean, seriously, like you see salt, you see flour, you see eggs, you see butter, you see water, but is this really bread? I mean, this is bread. This isn't bread. This is bread. And exactly, it's the same way with your pitch. Just the fact that you mention the name of your company, that you explain the problem you are solving, that you outline the 3 convincers that will convince us of your idea and your team being the best people to accomplish this, that you present trends, that you present your business model, that you do this, that you do that. That doesn't mean that you've basically baked a complete pitch. Those are just the ingredients. There needs to be something that ties it down, sort of like yeast, you know? And the best way to do this is through storytelling. Because storytelling is actually one thing that we, I'd like to say, grew up on. But what I mean by that is that our ancestors, they use stories to communicate. I mean, it's when they found paintings in the caves, when they found cave paintings, it's not that those were just some random drawings. Those were actually stories being told. And stories serve a very, very deep and a very profound purpose in our society, because back in those days, in the caveman days, when you were left alone, there was a very, very good chance you would die, because you would encounter a saber-toothed tiger, as I showed you previously. So we constructed stories to really create some sort of coherence, to create coherent groups. So we've created the stories of Christianity, of Islam, of socialism, of fascism, of communism, of United States, of the Czech Republic, of Russia, of these different stories that basically their whole purpose is to inspire somebody to become a part of a larger group, are something we've used for eternity, for ever, since the since our ancestors, since the caveman days. So stories are something that is deeply baked into our brain. So please use stories when tying together things in your pitch. And what kind of stories? I mean, stories. When I say a story, it doesn't mean to sort of go on about when I was 4 years old. I encountered this and that, and ever since I mean, not those type of stories, but a complete narrative of, we found a problem, we validated with the market, we did this, and we see these trends that will allow it to thrive, survive, and grow, and gain you massive return on investment. A complete narrative that ties down all of these ideas into one, rather than just going, bam, problem, bam, solution, bam, business model, bam, finances, but something that truly ties it together. And definitely, if you can incorporate a personal story, how, for example, you relate to the story, to the problem that's being faced, that's essentially a bonus. And just sort of as to show you how stories make you feel, and what kind of stories are the best, take a look at this series of images. I mean, you have a lady, and Yep. You see, when you slowly add information and you keep adding these tiny twists and turns, it makes for a much more engaging story rather than something that is very very straightforward. I mean, this makes for a much less exciting story than the previous one. So just think about this concept of telling your story also in a not completely straightforward way, but making it really engaging, really thoughtful, rather than just going through like a single template that you found on the internet about how to pitch. Think about the ways you could restructure uh, basically the storyline you are presenting in a way that truly engages and resonates with the listener. I would show you a video from the movie Jaws. I think many of you have seen it. There is a very good reason why this movie in particular made so much money, because the movie starts, right? The movie starts, and this is one of the very very first scenes that you see in the movie. Yeah, I think you know how the rest of the movie goes. Uh, so yeah, uh, start with at a point of high drama, ideally. So that is why usually you would start with the problem, but just start again, as I mentioned, with a bang, with something unexpected, and then you can get into the rest of the story. So unexpected stories with a lot of twists and turns that are somewhat mysterious, that are shocking. Those are the best stories, and but stories overall sell much better than just plain old facts. So that's number five. And our last tip is something what I've mentioned in the beginning. So this is the tips I usually see from many other pitch coaches, presentation, speech coaches, trainers, whoever, whatever. They say, okay, well, let's look at somebody who was really awesome at presenting. Well, Steve Jobs. Okay, so what did Steve Jobs have? Well, he wore blue jeans, right? So blue jeans and a black turtleneck. Okay, so we have blue jeans, a black turtleneck, all right. And you suddenly look at the Steve Jobs starter pack, so you say, okay, well, he wore New Balances, and he put his hands like this, and he used to say one more thing, okay, and oh yeah, of course you cannot forget the glasses, and suddenly you'll go out and you'll do your presentation emulating Steve Jobs, and after a while, we have a bunch of Steve Jobses running around the world because everybody starts presenting like Steve Jobs, because that's what every pitch coach and presentation trainer has mentioned. And I think that is really, really dangerous advice, because when everybody presents the same according to Steve Jobs, I mean, Steve was one heck of a presenter, but if everybody did it like him, suddenly you'll lose the magic of presenting like Steve Jobs, and everybody becomes gray and boring and not special. So please embrace your authenticity. Add something yours. You cannot go and try to present like Steve Jobs. You cannot go and try to pitch like Elon Musk. You cannot go and try to pitch like me even. You cannot go and present like Sarah, for example, because everybody has something completely different. My style is maybe a bit more energetic, sort of pseudo funny. Steve Jobs was uh, also like a very, very engaging speaker. As I showed you, he had like certain phrases, certain things he used to do. Maybe the Elon Musks of this world are the more quirky people, but everybody has their unique style. You might be nerdy, you might be more confident, you might be a bit more shy, you might be whatever, but just add something that is authentically yours. And that is why I cannot tell you how exactly to keep eye contact and what exact gestures to do, because suddenly that takes away from your authenticity. So please don't shy away from you being authentic and having your unique style, because authenticity is awesome. Again, with the alliteration. And with that, we have all of our top 6 steps to supercalifragilisticexpialidocious success with your pitch. And if you haven't fallen asleep, well, that's cool. And in that case, thanks for your attention and that sort of stuff. And please, if you have any questions, if you'd like to consult your pitch with me, then on Slack, you can find me as Oliver Laryea. And also, please don't hesitate to add me on LinkedIn as, no points for guessing, Oliver Laryea. I'm doing this sort of thing much more frequently now under this brand name Communicate, where I'm helping founders, and I've even lately helped corporates to basically improve their pitches. So please add me if you feel like it. Throw me a review, endorse me. I'd be more than happy to help you if you ever need help also with your startup pitch. So yeah, for example, Deep Note, I'm waiting for you guys. You saw I did the case study. I hope I smashed it. I'm just joking, of course, but please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be very happy to help. And that's all for me. So thanks.